have more at stake, Idea and Vodafone. They need to, complete their 4G footprint and match up to the might of an Airtel or a Jio for that matter. What bands do you think would make sense for these incumbents to fill in the gaps?
I think first, let me correct the fallacy on 1800, 2100. I just heard that both bands are 4G. Actually, 2100 right now is a 3G band. It's not a 4G band. And 1800 is a 4G band. So I think that needs to be corrected, in further discussions. And if that is true, very clearly, both Idea and Voda are already committed to 3G. And therefore, if they have one carrier somewhere and they want to assimilate a second carrier, or if they don't have a carrier in some parts of the country but want to expand their reach on 3G, then 2100 becomes their option as of now, because 900 is very expensive. 900, according to me, on 3G will be only used in areas to make 900 contiguous for in-building coverage on 3G. Nobody will go and build a fresh band of, 5 megahertz. I think they'll all try to round it off to the nearest 5 megs wherever required to move from either not a full carrier to a full carrier, or from one carrier to two carriers. I think that's what they would do on 2G, on 3G. So I think will either of them opt out of 3G? I don't think so. I think they'll stay with 3G. But they need to augment their footprint on 4G, and there are two options available over there. One is 2.3 gigs, and the other is 1.8 gigs. 2.5 is also there. But my own take is, given the attenuation advantages of 1800 will be a preferred band compared to 2.3 or 2.5 at the moment. And therefore, 1800 will be a more favored spectrum band that people will be bid for. And I think that's exactly what you are relaying to everybody. So I'm not surprised with the moves at all. As far as 700 or 800 is concerned, 800 essentially rests with Jio and nobody else. And Jio has some 800 and 850 everywhere. Again, if he takes some more, it will be only to round it off to the nearest 5 megs so that there's a full carrier available. 700 seemed like a pass from the very beginning, because that's a new technology. It's not a question of earnest money deposit, but it's a question of now nurturing a new ecosystem over and above all the existing diversity that you have to manage. And I don't think the industry has an appetite for that at the moment.
Request you to stay on. Sanjay sir, request you to stay on because we want to discuss Airtel and Jio separately in just a bit. But first, to the point of the most preferred band for 4G right now, for those who are looking to fill the gaps. Kunal Bajaj also joins in. Kunal, do you agree? Do you think 1800 is where the fight is going to be? And if that's the case, to what extent, how high do you think the bids can go?
Good evening. Yeah, I definitely agree that 1800 is the most preferred band for 4G right now. The ecosystem is the most robust. It's an FDD band rather than TDD band. And to Sanjay's point earlier, Jio is the only one who's really got a pan-India-ish presence in that 800 band. So obviously, while everyone would prefer, for example, in 3G to have a 900 pan-India presence, but it's extremely cost prohibitive, and therefore not everyone will have the luxury to do that. Likewise, having a pan-India 800 presence is also not possible for everyone else. So therefore, after looking at those options, 1800 becomes the primary band for LTE available right now, and I think that's where the fight is going to be. And to your point about how high the prices can go, because there is 2300 and 2500 on auction, and while the attenuation there is 4, and while 2300 is TDD and not FTD, so there are some challenges with that as well. But still, it won't be that 1800 will go completely out of scope, in the sense that because there are other options to look at, operators will continue to look at it, I believe, very logically and see what they're willing to pay and what the affordability is without driving and running behind just 1800 blindly.
Okay, Mr. Matthews, comment on this. Your sense on 1800, you already mentioned, that was expected to be the hotspot, so to speak. What about 800 and 900? Let's not talk 700 right now, but 800 megahertz, 900 megahertz, are they likely to remain lukewarm zones?
Yeah, principally, as was mentioned, there's very real amount of spectrum in the 900. Most operators have pretty much what they have in the areas. So 900 in terms of quantum is really not there. 1800 continues to be the attractive path. But let me just say this. I've had some conversations with some of the network people, And they've indicated that going forward, bands are going to be increasingly irrelevant, and that more and more operators, network manufacturers are looking at all bands for offering LTE. And so, after a certain price point, it's possible that some people might start looking at 23 and 25. There's plenty of that available. And depending on the price points, remember that 25, we talk about FTD, LTE, TDD, but 25 is already being used, 2300 is already being used. China is a major player. There is the use of 2500 there. So again, it's quite possible that people, based on price points, might start looking at those bands again for filling in a pan-India print.
Sure, totally take that point. I mean, we do live in an era of liberalized spectrum. So, Sanjay, let me come back to you. What are we talking about then in terms of real capital commitment? If you're going to fight it out in this market, and this question primarily pertains to both Vodafone as well as Idea, then what's the kind of capital commitment that these companies will have to make to, endure and survive under the might of RelGeo?
Well, I think if anybody believes that all the investment made by RelGeo is the end of it, we all will be very surprised that there's a lot more to come. I mean, we can only go by examples of rest of the world where there's 50, 60, 100 megs of spectrum per operator. There's almost 100% connectivity to backhaul, fiber-based backhaul. And there is Wi-Fi, which is all pervasive all across. And still after all this, when you look at the expenses incurred by, say, US, all operators, it's about $70 billion a year. If you go to China, it's about $78, $79 billion a year. Even if you go into smaller countries like Korea, they spend $28 billion. And Japan spends $14, $15, $16 billion. So I think compared to that, the Indian operators are spending far less. Whatever's gone up to now has gone behind spectrum, but it has not gone behind customer experience. And it has not gone behind creating a robust video-grade backhaul network. So we are yet to see video-grade networks in this country. And truly, if India has to get competitive, then we are talking of a very different magnitude of investments to come in. And therefore, I don't want to make that wild guess. But that is going to be substantially higher and sustained for many years to come.
Sanjay, on the point of Jio itself, which already has a 4G pan-India spectrum, what do you think is at stake for them in this auction, and where do you think their bids might come in?
I think truly, if Reliance Jio was to totally give it a pass, I wouldn't be surprised, because they have enough right now, and their major concentration right now should be to get the customer experience right. However, the only thing that I could expect out of them is that they have a lot of 1800 and 2.3 gigahertz. So would they like to augment a little more capacities behind in-building coverage and bid for a little extra 800, 850? That won't surprise me. Or get a little extra band for 1800, that won't surprise me. But if you were to say they'll go gangbusters after accumulating more spectrum, I don't think that's going to be the strategy. I think this whole 6,500 crores of honest money is more of a positioning statement. I don't think they are going to be incurring that much of money in these auctions. They don't need to really.
That's an interesting thought. So let me come back to you, Kunal. I guess the players for whom the stakes are really high in this auction, as we all know, it's Vodafone and Idea. What do you think should be an appropriate strategy from their side? And again, the same question, if you could at least, quantify in terms of some rough guesstimates on capital commitment that they'll have to make, at least for spectrum, in order to be significant players against Jio and Airtel.
Yes, so it's difficult to project exactly what the numbers are, but I agree with you that this is most critical for Idea and for Vodafone. But I would disagree that it's primarily due to what Reliance Jio is doing, because even if you just compare their position to Airtel's position, Airtel from a spectrum perspective is far ahead of both of these operators. So even if Reliance Jio were not to have entered the market at the time that it has right now, and given the direction that data consumption is going in, Vodafone and Idea would have had to have a pretty significant presence in this auction, and I think they will do that. It's important for them to make sure that they bolster up their data spectrum availability across the country and in their key markets. In addition to that, I agree with Sanjay's point that Jio is probably put EMD down from a defensive perspective, that if people start to bid on lots of different bands, that Jio is present there in order to potentially block or buy spectrum that could become attractive or could become the right price based on who's bidding where. But I think one more statistic to think about is, even with all of the spectrum that's available to both Airtel and to Reliance Jio today, on average, you're still only seeing about 1 gig per user per month.
Kunal, so sorry to come in on this, because I just want to get a last point from Mr. Matthews as well. Mr. Matthews, this point that our guests have made, that maybe that earnest money that Jio has put out is more of a deterrent than anything else. Your sense on the broader question, hasn't Jio's entry really raised the stakes in this particular auction, and what do you think its impact is going to be?
Certainly, Reliance Jio has set the benchmark much higher in terms of giving away free voice and bundling services. That clearly has raised the benchmark. What we are seeing, especially in this period when there is a free offer, the quantum of data that is being consumed is quite phenomenal, actually. So the appetite for data is there, as we can see. The only question is how one monetizes. The price points have come down, no question about that. So everybody now realizes data is clearly going to be the future. The quantum of data is clearly going to require the bandwidth that Sanjay and others have talked about. So clearly, those investments have to be made. So overall, yes, I think we've all along said that the interest of Reliance would be positive for the overall industry in terms of these parameters: education, raising awareness, making those types of price points available. All positive for the industry, and I think we're seeing this in this auction process.
All right, Mr. Matthews, thanks for joining in. Mr. Kapoor as well as Kunal, appreciate you being with us on the show. It's only day one, and there's a long way to go before these auctions close up. With that, it's a wrap on this special edition. Thanks so much for watching.